In the Spotlight on Afternoon Talk with Ashraf Garda. All the big names making big money and even bigger headlines. Only on SAFM.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to move and change tack completely. By the way, Joey just reminded me, our producer, to say, tell people that we have on the Friday issue of Afternoon Talk, Friday edition, in fact, the 2 o'clock discussion. The big question on the Friday is always what we call the people's voice. And what that means is you set the agenda. It's something that we're not talking about, something that you want us to raise. And then we get you on the air, and then we get other people to talk around it. It could be you, whatever it is you want to raise. So can you do this? Drop me an email and note the email address. It's afternoontalk@safm.co.za. Afternoontalk@safm.co.za. Mark that email, people's voice, and then motivate one. We should have the topic. I'd love to get you on. Want some topics that we don't normally talk about, that for whatever reason we're overlooking, and we can certainly raise it. So it could well be you this week, Friday. Well, for now, it's in the spotlight. As you know, somebody of prominence, somebody who's going to certainly get us thinking today. It's the turn of Dr. Umar Johnson, spelled U-M-A-R. He's a doctor of clinical psychology, and he's a certified school psychologist. He's from the USA, and it's in the country, and I'm just looking at the t-shirt. It says every month is Black History. It's a yellow t-shirt. We'll take some pictures right now, and we'll certainly post them on Facebook and Twitter. And the mates have got the motherland. So I'm trying. You can know exactly where I'm coming from, right? And the third one's got something called UA. So three of you will find out exactly what all of that means. Well, Omar, good chatting to you, and thanks for allowing me to put you in the spotlight.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And you know the obvious thing, like, what are you doing here?
I came here to speak. I was invited by the Black House Collective. In America, I am one of the more sought-after motivational and informational speakers in the country. Obviously, being a school psychologist, I'm one of the few African-American men in my country who are actually certified as school psychologists. And that means we have the responsibility of evaluating young people in school to determine whether or not they have learning disabilities, which would include such things as intellectual disability, ADHD, autism, deafness, blindness, and other types of problems.
Is that the acronym ADHD?
Yes, that's an official
Autism,
diagnosis.
Deafness?
No.
No?
ADHD
as a
is its
point.
own.
Yes,
attention
okay,
deficit.
All right. Okay, of course, attention deficit. Yes, and that's another big issue, right? So in terms of being here, what you're giving talks, right?
Yes, sir. I'm also a Pan-Africanist. I'm former Minister of Education for Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, and I'm also a blood relative of Frederick Douglass, who many consider the greatest African-American in U.S. history, who fought to end slavery there. So we're blood relatives. So. And
that issue about, he was this abolitionist, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and I'm trying to just look at some parallels in terms of whatever it is that you or your forebears fought for in the USA then, and some of the issues, and I'll say this in a democratic South Africa, that the students of our country are raising right now. You know, I'll be surprised if you came here and then just said, I'm on holiday, and put your blinkers on. No, I would think you would be wondering and forming opinions of what's going on. What are your thoughts?
Well, tomorrow I'll actually get an opportunity to engage those students. I'll be speaking at the University of Johannesburg, Soweto campus from 4 until 7.
All right.
And I support what they did. It was very, very necessary. You can't have a situation where you have young people who cannot afford to get an education, especially in a post-apartheid South Africa, because if you cannot get that education, it's going to limit the opportunities you have in life, which basically creates another type of de facto apartheid. So I stood in solidarity with them. I'm glad they did what they did, because the youth on the college campus has often been one of the strongest sources of progressive change in society. And we've seen a dropping of that. Even in America, this college student population isn't as activist-minded as it was in the 60s when we had Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown and others.
And having said that, what is interesting about this, of course, we know that for 20-odd years, the ruling party is very much on side in terms of holding the moral high ground. In practical terms, the youth here largely are dissatisfied, largely concerned about issues around education and the cost, etc. Yet they're venting their opposition to it, mainly to people who effectively are supporters, or if not from the actual ruling party. Yet many of the students themselves come from student bodies that effectively reflect the ruling party. They have their support. Do you see any
Well,
contradiction?
yes, I've seen that. I've noticed that. I've heard some of the conversations about the contradiction between those who actually represent the students and the students themselves. But I think in many respects, that is a reflection of what we see in a larger society. You have the masses who want a certain thing, but then you have the representation of those masses who tend to form a relationship with the power structure, which often soften their position, bringing them in direct conflict with the people they're supposed to represent.
I want to ask you, what do you hope to achieve by coming in and talking to us? In fact, what are we talking about? Because you made the point about being this Pan-Africanist. What does that really mean? 0891 104 207. You certainly can engage with my guest, Dr. Umar Johnson. Absolutely. You can tweet at Ashraf Garda. You can tweet him as well, Dr. Umar Johnson, spelled UMAR, and then Johnson with a DR, of course, for Dr. At the beginning. And well, if you are, use the hashtag SAFM80, and you can also tweet, rather SMS me to 34701. Lots more from him, including, he's thoughts about Pan-Africanism and where's it going? We'll ask him all of that right after this.
Our best conversations are the ones we have with you. Caller, information leader.
Dr. Umar Johnson with me. He's in the country. He's from the USA. He's a doctor of clinical psychology and is also a certified school psychologist. That issue about children being stereotyped in terms of disabilities will come up somehow in the discussion. I know that. I just want to confirm, so you are speaking tomorrow at University of Joburg, Soweto campus.
Yes.
Any other talks in the next couple of days?
Oh, yes, we have several. Tomorrow, before that, I'll be at the Jabalani Technical High School from 11 until 1. I'll be at the National Broadcasting Institute on 3 President Street from 9 until 11. And then that same day, we'll be at Nikki's Oasis, 138 Bree.
Okay.
Well,
I'll tell you what, you can tweet all the information to me, okay?
Yes.
And then I'll gladly share it with other people. Right, let's talk about then, you made the point about Pan-Africanism.
Yes, sir.
So what do you understand by that? What does it really mean? Mm-hmm. And is it a battle against others it's a race that you're winning, or what?
Mm-hmm. Well, Pan-Africanism, which is the black man's oldest formal political ideology, posits that all people of direct African ancestry are one human family, and that they have an obligation to identify with their African ancestry before they identify with anything else. So being an African is more central to your identity than being a Muslim or being a Christian, being a Mason, or belonging to any professional association. So we believe in global African family. I'm in South Africa, but I'm not with South Africans. I'm with my African brothers and sisters. When I go to the UK, same thing. So we believe in family.
And why is that important? Why is it important to have this connection to Africa more than any other connection?
Well, one of the biggest reasons, number one, we all share common ancestry. Family is very important. Family is necessary for psychological health, social health, and everything else. You need family. Family is the number one protector of people. We are family beings by nature. Secondly, all African people across the diaspora suffer from some form of racism and white supremacy in some form or another. We've been scattered largely by the racism. The transatlantic slave trade, colonialism has separated us from each other. And because we fight the common challenges, we need to fight them together. What's going on in South Africa is the exact same thing going on in the United States. What's going on in the United States is the exact same thing going on in the Caribbean, Canada, the United Kingdom, where I just came from last week. Mm-hmm. Our problems are the same, and that's because they've been caused by the same challenge, and that is global white supremacy.
And yet, at that point, that you live in the USA, so you live under a democratic country. Many others live in other countries that are very, very democratic, and yet you're saying the common denominator is this form of oppression against.
Without question.
Why is that? Why? You see, the obvious thing somebody may be calling, and I'm sure about that because we have listeners who have strong opinions. But isn't the common denominator the weakness of the black man as opposed to the evil oppression that goes from anybody else that suppresses the black man? Understandably. So two different sides there.
No, I understand. The only way that the black man's weakness could be blamed on his current predicament is if the black man had equal opportunity to change his predicament. In other words, although apartheid has ended in South Africa, here we are 20 plus years later, but the wealth of South Africa is still largely concentrated in the hands of the Dutch and the British. So before I can be made responsible for improving my situation, I have to first be given an equal opportunity. It's the same thing in the United States. States. When slavery ended, African Americans owned 0.5% of all the wealth in America. And today we still own 0.5% of all the wealth in America. And it's not because we're lazy or weak. It's because the opportunity to amass wealth, to be able to finance infrastructure so we can build ourselves up has been cut off from us. Economic racism keeps African people in the situation they're in.
Okay, so yeah, am I telling you, well done, you've got a black or African American president in Barack Obama.
Yes,
You're
which
going to
means
say what?
I would
You're going to say, well done, that's fantastic?
No, I would not. No, I would not, because one of the strategies of racism is to put black faces in high places but maintain power. President Obama becoming president, just like President Zuma here, does not mean a new situation for African people. It depends who is calling the strings, who is the power. You look at South Africa, 87% of your wealth is in private hands. So the question becomes, how much authority does President Zuma actually have to improve the conditions of African people when the wealth of the nation is still in the same hands of the people who supported apartheid?
So what would you, if South Africans say, then therefore, advise us about our country, and you actually would say our country is my country because you're African.
Yes, sir.
As per your initial definition. So what advice would you give to South Africa?
My advice for South Africa will be the same for the United States as well as for the UK. In order for South Africa to really become this rainbow nation that is being propagated, you have to take back the wealth from those who illegally and unfairly amassed it, and you have to redistribute the wealth to all of South Africa so everyone in South Africa has an equal opportunity of making the life that they're told they have an opportunity to live. Without equality of wealth, there can be no equality of life. Democracy means nothing without economic opportunity.
Is there a country anywhere, I don't just even mean black versus white, anywhere where there's been an attempt to just equalize the wealth and everybody's just
in the modern sense, no, and that's because just about every country in the world has been impacted by one way or another by white supremacy. We look at the 17th century. Up until the 17th century, 85% of the developed world was colonized by Europeans. So that mindset of colonialism and imperialism is still very much operating the world. And many countries feel that they have to operate along a capitalistic line of exploitation in order to run the world, because that's the way the world has been ran for the past 100 years.
So that's in the modern world. And before that, any glaring, shining examples?
Well, I think if you look at a lot of traditional societies, they've all had their problems, but it wasn't run along capitalistic lines. And I can't think of a society where the wealth was so concentrated in the hands of a particular race versus another. How can there be equality when the wealth is concentrated in particular hands of people who are not even indigenous to that country? And from an African cultural perspective, you can't own the land. The land belongs to the people. You can't buy up the land. The land belongs to the people. From an African cultural perspective, we believe in communalism, which means everyone has an opportunity to eat. Everyone has an opportunity to work, to live. We don't believe in selfishly amassing wealth while others go poor.
All right. I'm sure you have questions you may want to ask or put to my in the spotlight guest, Dr. Umar Johnson. Umar spelled U-M-A-R, of course. 089-110-4207. Tabo, go ahead. Hi.
Hi, Ashraf. Can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can. Go ahead, Tabo.
Oh, okay. Hi, Dr. Johnson. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I just want to say that I'm so jealous that I was in Joburg last week, and I came to Cape Town this week, and then you decided to go to Joburg because of it.
I'll be in Cape Town next week. I'll be in Cape Town next week. Cape Town.
Okay, I'll make the point that
Yes, I will be there.
Okay, I'll make it. Oh, okay, we could just make the broadcast where you're going to be in Cape Town and when, so that I can go attend, because I've been waiting to attend one of your...
Okay, well, follow, check it out. We'll post it onto... Tapelo's looking at me. You'll post it on our Facebook page, SFM Radio, as well as on the website, I think, and certainly on my timeline on Twitter. You can certainly follow it as well. All right? Thanks for that. Thanks for that call. Tabo, thank you. There's comments, in fact, from some people. Cop saying this guest of yours is so clear. Another one, and then a whole lot of different alphabets say, do black Americans know they're making us dumb through MTV lies? You may want to comment on it, on what we consume.
Well, that's a big problem that I have, especially my message to parents who are raising children, because I'm a school principal as well. We have to detoxify our children from mainstream media. Too many of our children are watching shows they shouldn't be watching. A lot of the underlying messages that are being sent out to our children
examples
are not positive.
I mean, which type of show shouldn't they watch?
Let's look at America. In America, the top show on television now is Empire. Okay, it's a show based on an African-American dysfunctional family. He started a music corporation by selling illegal drugs, and in the family, everyone's dysfunctional. None of the men have positive relationships with women. These are not the type of images that African youth need to see. They need to see positive images of black families that work, positive images of African people who've been able to create an opportunity even when there was none. I'm seeing too many negative images of African people being recycled and recycled. How can that be positive for the next generation? Hip-hop music, gangster rap in and of itself. Now, hip-hop music has always been a positive force in African-American life, but now we have gangster rap, which has totally taken over the entire genre. Everything is about selling drugs, having sex, going to jail. We're literally popularizing behavior that leads to mass incarceration of black men. How can that be good?
So what then is your normal job? I mean, you speak, and I know I've watched some of your
private.
things.
I'm in private practice as a school psychologist, where I travel to different schools throughout Pennsylvania, which is where I live, and I evaluate children. I give out intelligence tests, achievement tests, psychological counseling, therapy. I do assessments. I diagnose mental illness. I diagnose learning disabilities. That's my everyday job. But I'm a Pan-Africanist, so I spend as much time traveling and teaching and trying to unite and empower as I do.
So let's talk about your teaching thing. I think one of the things that I picked up was you spend time with children who are misdiagnosed, right?
Yes.
And therefore, condemned, sort of tarred with a certain brush for the rest of their lives.
Yes.
Actually, explain what you mean and how you try and work around that.
Certainly. And by the way, that same issue of seeing so many African boys misdiagnosed and put in special ed, it's also a big issue here in South Africa, I've learned in the 5 days I've been. It's a big issue in the UK and Canada. Special education is a program that was created to give children with a disability an opportunity to succeed in school. However, it has been used as a weapon of racism, because what it does is for African boys who can't behave, can't sit still, might pose a behavior threat, they get diagnosed with problems that they don't even have. And one of the biggest right now is ADHD, this thing, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is being pushed by Wall Street because all of the drugs that are prescribed to these children after they're misdiagnosed with this so-called ADHD are publicly traded on Wall Street, you understand? So you're talking about a $32 billion a year industry that's getting paid off of African boys being misdiagnosed with this thing called ADHD.
And in terms of being misdiagnosed, are you saying it proportionately that white children are not misdiagnosed?
Yes, African boys are disproportionately diagnosed with ADHD. And when you look at the criteria for ADHD, it's normal boy behavior, not being able to pay attention from time to time, being hyperactive, not being able to sit still. It's a regular boy thing. But here's the issue. Schools are largely operated by women. When boys come to school, if you have a female teacher, she's looking for someone who can behave like she can. Boys need more opportunity to work off their energy, and they're not given that. He doesn't have a disability. He's a growing boy going through puberty. He's an adolescent. He has testosterone. He needs to get up and move around. That's not a disability. The problem is the schools are not designed to appropriately serve the needs of black boys. And
how then do you change that through your work? Because, I mean, you are this, you qualified as a psychologist, so you're not just someone who has a political thought on it. You actively, even medically, can talk about it. How then do you change that?
We have to build our own schools for our children. One of my biggest plans right now is to build the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy. This is going to be a Pan-African school district where African boys around the world can be educated by African men, where they can be taught appropriate African history, so they're not being told about Christopher Columbus and Cecil John Rhodes, who were enemies of African people, but they get a healthy appreciation of themselves and their people's contribution to human history. We also want to teach them entrepreneurial science. This is very important.
What is that? It's not a word that we use. Yes. Entrepreneurship we use, but entrepreneurial science.
To create economic opportunity for oneself as opposed to waiting around looking for a job. Okay, there's too many college-educated African people, South Africa, United States, and the UK, who can't find work. In America, we have over 2 million African Americans with master's and doctorate degrees cannot find a job. Going to college, in and of itself, is not a recipe for success. It could be a recipe for disaster, because after you graduate, you have to pay back those student loans. And if you can't find a job to do so, you can end up in a homeless shelter, just like someone who don't have a degree. We need economics.
And in the South African context, I mean, many students currently fighting, well, they want to study.
Yes.
They also don't want to pay, because they believe because of disadvantages. But what you're saying is even when they do graduate, they still have a problem if they don't have an entrepreneurial science background.
Yes.
So they will not, because the economy is not large enough to take them all in. By and large.
By and large. Yeah. The only reason why I hesitated is that the economy can be conducive to making sure that African people do a little bit better under it. But the problem is when the corporations are largely concentrated in the hands of the former colonizer, it becomes difficult to get a job even if you are well educated for that job. See, that's where the economic racism and employment racism comes in. I might be as qualified as the next man, but I might not be of the color that the corporation is looking for, which is why if you look at South Africa, US, UK, many professional blacks are employed by the state. They're employed by the state because private corporations aren't interested in having us around.
That's interesting. Get your thoughts. Now, we're going to chat to you, but I think we've just lost you for a second. Let's then talk about your own story, Yeah. So I would suggest then you're not typical of what comes out of America.
No, I'm not.
Right? And therefore you're on this journey to try and change things, right?
Yes.
What then happened to you?
Well, I come from a very traditional family. I was raised in North Central Philadelphia. I went to a military high school for high school. My father sent me there because he thought I was a mama's boy, and he said he wanted to get me away from my mama. So I went to the military high school where they prepared us to go into the United States Army, which is something I was not interested in as a conscious African. So I then went to college, Millersville University, traditional white teachers college, Pennsylvania, graduated from there. I went right back and got my master's degree in school psychology, came back to Philadelphia, became a school psychologist, went back to school to get my second master's in educational leadership to become a principal, went back to school again to get my doctorate degree and my third master's in clinical psychology. So I went to 3 white universities. I regret having never went to a historically black college in America, and I don't know how that even happened.
Why do you regret it? What did you miss?
Because when I go to black colleges now, I speak a lot at college, and I'm jealous of the fact that those children went through a learning process where they didn't have to experience the racism and discriminatory treatment that I had to experience. All through college, I was the only African American in just about every class.
Wow. Okay.
You see.
Well, we'll pick up on that in a second. Trantland Buthelezi, go ahead. Hi. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, thanks for.
Hi, doctor, how are you?
Thank you. Go ahead, yeah.
Yes. I would like the doctor to try and find an opportunity to address Parliament, particularly the ruling party, on the questions that he's raising, because I caught him in of his speech. But it's very interesting here in South Africa, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, where I stay. The domination of the economy is by the whites and Indians Muslims are very rich, and they sideline the South Africans who are Africans who happen not to be Muslim, and they sideline them. They prefer foreign nationals who happen to be Africans and they are Muslim. I don't know how to address this. Maybe you can give us an advice, but I would request that you discuss these matters with the government, because 20 years into democracy, we are told that the road to freedom, economic freedom, is still long, whereas we are in power as African people, but the government is very, very scared of holding the bull by its horns. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that call. So, okay, I mean, that's a very general thing. I mean, specific with regard to general issues, I'm not sure how you can address that, excepting if you had the ear of government about addressing inequalities that we have, and I mean, linked to that is obviously prejudice. It's just one aspect. I mean, what would you tell them?
Well, I think the main thing that I would tell them is that if you really want to embrace this concept of a one Africa, there has to be economic equality, and that the corporations that amass wealth through apartheid, they must be made to pay reparations to the indigenous people of South Africa. On top of that, individuals who own corporations in this country who are not indigenous to South Africa, there must be some sort of policy that's put in place that requires them to hire to train indigenous Africans to participate in their corporations. It's not fair to come to South Africa, amass all this wealth, and not be given any responsibility.
But by and large, we have that. It's affirmative action, and I think it's certainly part of what we do, whether we do it well or not.
The affirmative action isn't dealing with the wealth.
All right, we'll talk about that in a second. 3:30, lots more to come. Chatting to Dr. Umar Johnson, and I am making the effort to pronounce the name, so you may not pick it up incorrectly. UMAR, Umar Johnson, is from the USA. He's a clinical psychologist and also certified as a school psychologist, also a school principal, I suppose, which is a very important issue. You may want to call, maybe 1 or 2 calls is the most I can take. 0891 104 207. 3:30, here's the news headlines. Right, chatting in fact to Dr. Umar Johnson, 0891 104 207, putting him in the spotlight. PM Live comes up 4 to 6. Listen out for that. And don't forget what I said earlier on. If you wish to raise an issue, not today, but on your own, when you are the expert, on the Friday People's Voice, I want to give you that voice. Absolutely. You drop me an email to afternoontalk@safm.co.za. That's for that. General emails to me, most welcome. Ashraf, spelled ASHRAF, ashraf@safm.co.za. Dr. Umar Johnson with me. Right, you spoke about reparations.
Yes.
So we never had that. We've had a type of truth and reconciliation, which is an emotional issue, but the issue of actual reparations has not happened. What are your thoughts about, should we do it? I think you've already alluded to that, but how then do we do the issue of reparations 21 years into democracy?
Well, first, when we look at the truth and reconciliation process, to me, to some extent, that was a bit of a mockery, because I don't understand how people who committed crimes against other people simply had to admit to the crimes that they committed and did not have to pay any type of restitution or damage to the people that they aggressed against. When the European Jews found the Nazis and they had their Nazi trials, you didn't just admit that you participated in the Holocaust of Jews. You went to jail for participating in the Holocaust of Jews.
So you admit, you then go to jail, then you come out and you lead a normal life. In South Africa, that didn't happen.
Exactly. Nobody paid. Nobody was paid to suffer. They didn't go to jail.
All right. So many say it was done under the basis of we needed a united country. And, of course, Nelson Mandela, much loved by many around the globe.
And he's a hero of mine. He's a hero of mine.
So why would he be a hero when in fact, that is a key issue that would contradict what you say?
Let me explain it. Nelson Mandela is a hero of mine because of the sacrifices he's made as a youth that led to him ultimately being incarcerated. The Nelson Mandela that came out of jail did make some serious concessions that I think affected the ability of Black South Africa to become an equal partner in this society. He did. But at the same time, after spending 27 years in jail, being an elder at the age that he was, I cannot overly criticize his behavior at that point. So when I say he's a hero, I'm looking more at the young Nelson as opposed to the one who led us to independence.
So for the record, some of the concessions that he made that you think were errors, what were they?
Well, one of the concessions is allowing those who held power in apartheid to continue to hold the economic wealth of this country in their hands today. There has been no restitution by those corporations. Okay, the diamond mines, the gold mines, black people died in those mines. They were forced to work, in many cases, almost for free. They took them by force. How can you, take over my country, and then apartheid ends and we're now an independent nation, and you still own the resources that you stole from me under apartheid? How can that be fair?
So you would have done what?
I would have taken back all the wealth and redistributed to South Africa so everyone living in this country has an equal opportunity to build a life.
That's the one. Maybe 2 others quickly.
The 2 others, I also think the education system has to be overhauled. Right now, the system that our children are being taught right now, it is still an apartheid system. I was at a meeting yesterday where one of the teachers told me one of her female students drew a picture of herself with blue eyes. Why is an African child wanting to look white? You know why? Because they can perceive, even that young, that it is the white people in this country who still wield the power, not the Africans. You gave black people a vote. You gave black people an anthem. You gave black people a flag, but you kept the power. I don't want the vote. Give me the wealth.
Okay, and the third one?
And the third thing that I would do is I think that those who were majorly participatory in the apartheid regime have to be removed from the country. They have to be sent into exile. You can no longer be here.
Now, and I will get to calls in a second. The Mandela you spoke about, the
Yes.
young Mandela,
Yes.
is one person. Most of South Africa, in fact, will glorify him for his sacrifice as a youngster, but they'll honor his greatness for his willingness to compromise as the older person, the part that you don't like.
Well, I wouldn't say the part I don't like. As I said earlier,
The mistakes he made, according to you.
Here's what I believe in my heart. I believe Nelson Mandela looked at his age. He looked at how much time he had left on this earth. And he said, I'm not going to be able to fix this problem, but I'm going to do what I have to do to move us a little bit further out of the oppression that we're under. I'm sure he left this world understanding that his people's fight for freedom was not done. But I think he did what he could, where he could, while he could, and I respect him for that. Did I agree with the concessions? As a Pan-Africanist, I can't, but I can still respect the man and the entire legacy he lived.
Okay, we're going to not talk about Mandela now. We move on. I'll take 3 calls. That's all I can take. Very, very quick calls that I can. Let's start with Michael in Durban. Michael, go ahead. Hi. Quick, short, sharp ones, please, eh? Michael?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael, how are you? Very well. I'll show you, Brother Johnson. One quick one. I mean, right now, what we see in South Africa, it's been a boiling point. Nothing has changed. The African people are still oppressed, and leaders that are there, they're just buying face. Nothing's going to change until we take our own land back. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, got that. Thank you so much for that. Right, Riaz, go ahead. Hi.
Hi, great show.
Thank you.
Umar, thank you very much for bringing up Marcus Garvey. Congratulations on that, and I hope you look at the work of Denny Wadada Nabudere on Africology, who was sponsored by the Marcus Garvey Institute. The problem I have with your commentary is essentially you don't use the word neoliberalism enough, because here neoliberalism has got a black face in South Africa. I mean, Thabo Mbeki said, call me a Thatcherite, and this is a problem. The other issue is identity politics of the USA, just doesn't run here. We got to focus on the economics. Identity politics has limits. I'll listen on the radio.
Okay, got that. Thanks for that, Riaz. In fact, let's take one last call, then I'll get a response from my guest in one go. Zeddy, quickly from you. Hi.
Hi to your guest as well. And I just want to say your guest is fabulous in his vocabulary and well-talented. And he's a God-given gift. He should go to every hospitals and every schools and educate our black children and our diverse children. Our diverse children, because we are a diverse country. We should say black children. We should say diverse children in every school. Please educate them, and I'm sure they'll learn something.
I don't think he's got the time. He's from the USA. He's got bigger work to do there. I mean, he's visiting.
No, he can do it. They can do it via media.
Right.
He can do it via media.
Thank you so much. In fact,
you're welcome.
Thanks for that. But just let's just touch on that, because I mean, in terms of where you were as a psychologist, you made the point that if you were in practice, you'd meet 50 people in a week.
Yes.
And you chose to educate. Explain that. Yes. That talks to what Zeddy said.
Certainly. One of the reasons I decided to get my school principal certificate is I realized that in being a school administrator, I could help prevent a lot of the mental problems that our children had. In other words, being a principal, I could stop the problem. Being a therapist, I solved the problem after it's been created. In other words, a lot of our children suffer from low self-esteem. A lot of them do still perceive white people as being superior to them. And this is universal. I don't care where I'm at on the planet. Black children perceive white people to be prestigious, to be more attractive. In America, black women spend a disproportionate amount of their disposable income on hair care products trying to look like white females. So the self-esteem of African children has to be corrected, and I think I could do a better job through education. And in fact, we are going to consider building one of the schools, the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academies here in South Africa, because I understand a lot of the schools.
So that will happen.
It may happen. We're investigating it. We're going to put together a task force before I leave South Africa, and we're going to see what schools are available. Would it be better to build the school from the ground? We already have brothers and sisters who want to be part of the curriculum committee to develop the curriculum to make sure it is an African-centered liberation curriculum and not one for further oppression. So we may see that school here in South Africa.
I'll get your thoughts on what some of the issues Riaz brought up. We'll do that just after this. Dr. Umar Johnson with us. He's from the USA, he's in the country. He's back home, I suppose, in the light of the talk around Pan-Africanism. I just want to touch on the school. So you're looking to do it here. You're planning to do a school in the USA, a school for blacks and a school for men specifically.
Yes.
Has it happened? What's happened?
We're still raising the money on that. We're trying to purchase a historically black college in Virginia. St. Paul's College, which was built during Reconstruction times, closed down 3 years ago. They want $2 million US. However, I'm still continuing to look around the world, particularly to Africa, and put the first school here if we're not successful raising the $2 million to do it in America. Because obviously, with the money exchange rate, I probably already have enough money to build the school.
Well, maybe it'll be great if we do that, because I think the impact you make in terms of where we want to go as a country will be even greater. Riaz made the point about neoliberalism. You used it a few times. Mm-hmm. You may want to comment on that?
Well, I agree with him. I think we spoke to it earlier. I didn't use that term, but without question, I think the black bourgeoisie, as we call it, the talented tenth, that elitist class of black folks that the power structure uses to keep other black people misinformed, miseducated, and disenfranchised, has to be dealt with. But I think a lot of us are very ambivalent about discussing the black bourgeoisie, the neoliberalists, because the power that they wield over us, they can affect our lives. So the average South African probably doesn't want to speak about the role that the educated African is playing in the further oppression of South Africans, because they don't want to receive any sort of retribution for speaking up honestly.
Okay, and quick one, very topical right now. Students went on, protested because they wanted either no fee or a reduction. I think in the short term that's happened. Many of them still continuing to protest. They want more.
I think they need to continue with the push. But from what I'm understanding, there's a split within the movement. Those who are financed by the ruling regime are trying to redirect and get the students to settle. So they have to eliminate the internal division, because division has always been the weapon to keep African people from progressing more. And then after they fight for the elimination of a fee hike, they need to fight for the elimination of fees altogether, because it is my understanding that part of the ANC charter spoke to free education for all of South Africa.
And if it takes, say, 6 to 8 months, do they put education on hold in that period?
If it's necessary. Okay. Equality must come first. It's no need to participate in an unfair system unless you have equality.
Does a movement need an obvious leader?
No, it needs leadership, but it doesn't need an obvious leader. I think African people need to move away from one person at the top that has not served us well. They can either be assassinated, imprisoned, or they can be made to betray the struggle. We need teams, elders, brothers, sisters, youth. We need leadership teams, not individual leaders.
Having said that, who are the people when you grow up, and even now, maybe 3 names that have made a huge impact on your life?
The Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, my ancestor Frederick Douglass, and Steve Biko here from South Africa.
Those 3 have had the greatest impact?
I would probably have to name 50 people if I named it, because I've been influenced by so many. It would be hard to narrow it down to 3. There's Harriet Tubman, there's Queen Nzinga, there's Shaka Zulu. I'm a very big Shaka Zulu fan, so it's just too many to name. Menelik II, Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Thomas Sankara, Frantz Fanon, Huey P. Newton, Malcolm X, Dr. King.
And of course I'm holding back, so just carry on talking. People are writing them all down. Right, give me well, if you had to have lunch with the president, our president right now, and you could ask him one question, you'd ask him what?
I would ask him to fill in the gaps in my understanding as to why Black South Africa hasn't progressed more. Because from the seat he sits in, I have to be respectful of the fact that he has to manage something that has gotten a lot of African heads of states taken off the face of this earth. And that is, how do I transition power to my people at the bottom without upsetting the power structure so much that they decide to seek physical retribution against me? I know he has to consider that.
Almost done, Dr. Umar Johnson. A great life lesson you've learned?
A great life lesson that I learned is all we can do is do our best and leave the results to God.
A book that you recommend we must read?
A book that we must read is The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey.
You made the point about religion. Can we? Are you religious? Yes, no?
I'm spiritual. Religion is a system that teaches you how to relate to God. Spirituality is an open system that allows you to build your own relationship with the Most High.
A quote, just leave us with.
That would come from my ancestor Frederick Douglass, who said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Power conceives nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. All
right, and get your pen and paper or your smartphones ready. Your email address.
Email address, drumarjohnson@yahoo.com. That's DRUMAR Johnson@yahoo.com. Website, drumarjohnson.com. And you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Dr. Umar Johnson. And if anyone needs a list of the events that we have in South Africa, they can get them off my Instagram, off my Facebook, or they can email me for them.
Well, tweet the links to me as well. And if they are stuck with, if we lost any of their names, they just follow me on my timeline. You'll connect to Umar Johnson pretty soon. Well, thanks for your time and great chatting. And I have a sense we'll have another chat with you. And we don't have to be geographically next to each other.
Yes, sir.
Even when you're back in the USA, we'll talk to you about
sir.
home, right?
Thank you.
Dr. Umar Johnson in the spotlight. Hopefully you enjoyed all of that. Time now for Radio Vuka.